Welcome to IBA 614 Global Marketing. Today is our 7th session, and we will be looking at the first part of the global marketing mix. Now, the global marketing mix is basically going to look at how global marketers apply the primary marketing tools, which is we refer to as the marketing mix, or the 4 Ps, made up of product, price, place or distribution, and promotion or communication, to be able to reach customers and promote and sell their products and services to them in foreign markets. So by the end of this session, as usual, there are certain learning outcomes we hope to achieve. Given that this is the first part of our session on the global marketing mix, we will be focusing on the first 2 elements of the marketing mix, being product and pricing. And then in the subsequent session on the global marketing mix, we will look at the remaining 2 elements, being distribution or place and communication or promotion. So by the end of this session, we will look to discuss the influences that lead a firm to either standardize or adapt its marketing mix, being the elements we have just mentioned, for the global market. And then secondly, to be able to explore how each of these individual marketing mix elements are combined in the form of global marketing strategies in international markets. So like I mentioned, we will look at product and pricing today, and then we will look at the remaining 2 elements in the next session. So let's first begin by doing a brief introduction of the global marketing mix. Like I said, it is made up of the elements of the marketing mix, which global marketers would usually combine to be able to formulate strategies on how to be able to effectively promote and sell their products and services to customers in foreign markets. Now, depending on which kind of good you're looking at, whether you're looking at a physical product or a service, you'll be dealing with a certain number of Ps. So if we are dealing with physical products, we will primarily be talking about the 4 Ps, which are product, price, place, and promotion. And then when we are talking about services, we will add 3 additional Ps, which are processes, people, and physical evidence. Now, in this particular session and the subsequent session we will focus primarily on only the 4 Ps, because products basically are formulated in a manner that make them prone to standardization to a large extent, at the same time, adaptation. However, in terms of services, by virtue of their nature alone, services can never be completely standardized in any setting because of a particular characteristic that they possess, which we will go into in the subsequent slides. So by way of introduction, we are saying that when firms enter foreign markets, they make decisions regarding these marketing mix elements I've talked about. And it essentially helps them to decide what kind of marketing and organizational setup to choose in order to effectively promote and sell whatever product or service it is that they have in the foreign markets that they have chosen to enter into. So they would largely focus on each of these individual elements and how to go about formulating the subcategories under each element to suit their organizational strategy for going global with their product or service, to be able to effectively target the customers that they have identified in this foreign market, who they want to sell this particular product or service to. So specifically, we are saying that when it comes to these marketing mix elements, they should either be standardized or adapted per global marketing literature, depending on the focus of the organization and what their preliminary analysis tells them about the markets that they want to enter into. So the decision to standardize or adapt is not one that is taken lightly. It is one that is taken based on extensive research and analysis conducted by the organization using various forms of primary and secondary data, as well as an in-depth analysis of their environment, both at the micro and macro level, as well as their internal situation as an organization. All of these, once done in an effective and efficient manner, will lead the firm to a concrete decision on whether to standardize or adapt for the foreign market. And as we will learn very soon, standardization or adaptation is not a one-size-fits-all approach. So without performing these extensive background checks and research that we are talking about, there is no way the firm will be able to appropriately decide whether or not to standardize or adapt their product or service for a foreign market. So now that we've done a brief introduction on global marketing and the global marketing mix, let's talk about standardization. So when we say standardization, it means the firm develops a standardized product or service, right? And markets it in foreign markets using a standardized marketing mix group of elements. So that means that when they choose a standardization approach, it means that all the markets in which the standardization approach is being utilized will be seeing the same application of the elements of the marketing mix in terms of the product, the pricing, the promotion, and the distribution. However, when we talk about adaptation, it is slightly different. And because of that, there are arguments for standardization and for adaptation. For instance, in terms of standardization, the arguments in favor of standardization say that, first of all, it leads to simplicity and lower cost, which a lot of firms enjoy very much because they usually do not have enough resources to go around. Also, in terms of standardization, proponents of this approach have said that the firm can be able to set up what they refer to as a global company that has a uniform product and service image in all parts of the world in which they sell. Proponents also go ahead to say that standardization leads to economies of scale in production because you do not have to spread yourself thin and employ myriad resources to produce different kinds of products and services for different markets that you wish to sell. And as a result, you will also enjoy economies of scale in terms of research and development and promotion. Again, proponents for standardization say that it leads to a synergetic and transferable experience, as well as efficiency, meaning that they are able to take the lessons that they learn in the different markets across the world and be able to apply this knowledge in the other markets where they are selling the same standardized products and services, right? I think the word here is not synergetic. I think it should be synergistic. So I'll go with synergistic, right? So it leads to a synergistic and transferable experience and efficiency. So the synergy here refers to the fact that they are able to combine their resources and combine the knowledge they gain from all the markets in which they sell and serve to benefit them in the other markets where they sell and serve, which will ultimately lead to efficiency, given that the lessons they learn from the mistakes committed in other markets will definitely not be replicated or repeated in the other markets that they sell as well. However, like I mentioned earlier, when it comes to standardization, it means you are doing the same thing across board in all the different markets that you sell. And if what we have learned from the analysis of the microenvironment and the macro environment is anything to go by, we know that consumers in all foreign markets are not the same. And that led us to discuss the aspect of segmentation and targeting and the STP process and why it is important to break down foreign markets into different segments that the firm can effectively target and serve. So going with a wholly standardized approach to global marketing in some instances could be suicidal, as it was for organizations like Mattel, who focused on selling the global image of a blonde Barbie. In emerging markets like India, where people are not necessarily always blonde and fair. Do you agree? Yes, Tara, please go ahead.
Yes, I definitely do agree. And I wanted to also add that Mattel also introduced a big variety in their line of dolls. I guess not too long after that incident. They have the black Barbies, they have the plus size, they even have one with a prosthetic leg, they have a bald Barbie. So they really looked at this very carefully to make sure that they were targeting everybody. And when you look at it too, it's not just even globally, but you'll realize that Americans typically make a lot of noise about inclusion.
Yeah.
So yes, not even just for the entire world, but even in their area where it's a very big thing, inclusion and diversity, they led the way in that as well. So I wanted to add that when I saw the example you had given.
Exactly. Very key point you shared there, Tara. Thank you so much. Right. So we realized that Based on this brief discussion we've had, even within markets that are supposed to share certain similarities in common, there are certain heterogeneous aspects of the market that firms need to pay close attention to, which again emphasizes why a completely standardized approach to global marketing may not be the best choice for any organization. And thus, it leads us into adaptation, which implies that firms would usually change various aspects of their products and services to a considerable extent in order to meet the needs of consumers in foreign markets, considering the local differences of consumers within these markets. And this is according to Chang 2009. Anita Dubate, please go ahead.
Good evening, Doc.
Good evening, Anita.
Okay, so I wanted to ask, do we have a company that actually uses this standardization? Because I'm looking at it from a product like Apple. We know Apple actually uses standardization. But even with that, when you take an Apple phone that was sold in maybe, let's say, the US, and that was brought to Africa, you can see there's a slight change in the features. So is Apple using standardization as an approach?
Okay, so as we will learn very soon, because companies cannot completely do away with the concept of standardization as a result of the generic build-up of products, they use standardization and adaptation together at different levels of the product. And I'll explain it very soon in the subsequent slides, how firms will choose to adapt certain elements of a product and standardize other elements of it. And the standardization usually takes place at the core level of the product, where there's a certain function that the product has to perform, and that function has to be performed regardless of where it's being sold in the world. And then when it gets to the other levels of the product, certain kinds of adaptation can take place, given that consumers in different parts of the world, when it comes to the additional levels of the product, which some people will often refer to as the fluff, some users can do without in certain parts of the world. So Anita, if you'll bear with me for a moment, when we get there, this will get clearer.
Thank you, Doc.
You're welcome, Anita. Okay, so in terms of adaptation, just like for standardization, people have made arguments for adaptation, and they have said that, first of all, adaptation is necessary because there are socio-cultural differences that we cannot escape all over the world. And these differences determine the individual nuances and perceptions and preferences of consumers, which are inescapable for any firm that is marketing any product or service to a consumer in these markets. Primary among these include the language that people speak, their education, their socialization, their age. All of these things influence how they approach the consumption of various products and services. And because of that, firms cannot escape the application of adaptation into their global marketing activities. Competition, again, is another argument for adaptation, because you can have a standardized product that will do well in several markets, but in certain markets, given the level of competition and how the competitors are positioning their product, you have no choice than to adapt what you have in the form of a standardized product to bring you up to the level of your competitors so that you can compete effectively. So again, adaptation is a necessary evil if you find yourself in the market that has intense rivalry from competitors. Again, in terms of economic differences, we realize that based on the nature of a product and how it's been designed and its features, it can lead to certain implications, particularly in the area of pricing and cost, such that considering the economic differences in various countries, there are certain products that if they are sold the way they are from their country of origin, people in certain markets, based on their economic situation and circumstances, will not be able to afford these products. Hence, another strong argument for adaptation in the global marketing mix. Again, legal and regulatory factors, which are a key macro-environmental issue that we cannot escape, often determine why a firm would go for an adaptation strategy rather than a standardization strategy. Because in all parts of the world, we can see various legal and regulatory factors that determine how firms can go about selling their products and services in these markets. And depending on the market you are dealing with and the geographic region in which the market is in, the legal and regulatory factors could differ. And therefore, you will have to standardize the product to suit the legal and regulatory conditions in these countries. A typical example being the left-hand drive syndrome, which is still very much alive in our current context, where we still have certain countries all over the world using left-hand drive, right? Like some Asian countries and European countries, like the United Kingdom. And then we have the other countries who also are using the right-hand drive, right? So if you're a car manufacturer and you were sending cars to these markets, you will have to abide by the regulatory conditions, where in left-hand drive countries, you know where to place the steering wheel, and likewise for the right-hand drive countries, right? But adaptation does not come cheap. It always comes at a cost, right? So because it comes at a cost, a firm has to make sure that when they choose an adaptation strategy, it is after they have done some full level of introspection to be able to understand whether the adaptation approach is the most cost-effective approach to use, given all the circumstances that they encountered when they were performing their analysis or doing their background checks of the microenvironment and the macro environment and the various customer segments in the market, to be able to understand whether or not the adaptation strategy is the best that will facilitate their entry into these markets. So with that being said, do we go for standardization or adaptation? Well, first of all, heterogeneity among different countries and markets, like we have just said, will not allow for a wholly standardized approach to global marketing, which we have clearly established. Again, literature argues that standardization and adaptation in themselves independently are not an all or nothing proposition, but rather a matter of degree. So like I was saying, for any organization selling any particular product or service, they decide the degree to which they want to standardize the product for specific markets and the degree to which they want to adapt the product for other markets. And in that vein, we are saying that if you are a forward-looking, proactive global marketing firm, you should make sure that you have done your homework and your necessary background checks such that you have put yourself in the position that you have the ability and the willingness to standardize when you have to and adapt when you have to, and do both simultaneously, depending on which of the markets you have decided to serve will best be served by which of the approaches, be it a standardization approach or an adaptation approach. Please, I hope you're all with me thus far.
Yes, Doc.
Great. So let's take a typical example of an organization which is very forward-looking, like Coca-Cola, right? Coca-Cola adopts the standardization and adaptation approaches to marketing their products and services all over the world. And that is because in terms of standardization, they have a base product that is loved by a lot of consumers in different parts of the world. However, these same consumers in different parts of the world in different markets also have different tastes and preferences, such that the standardized version of the product appeals to some customers, but not to all of them. So Coca-Cola has a strategy where they adapt for the markets that they need to adapt to, and they standardize for the markets where they need to standardize for. And you will realize that a lot of this adaptation is based on a number of factors, some including legal and regulatory factors, like for instance, the concept of Coke Zero, Diet Coke, and Coke Light. Even though the base product for all of them is the traditional Coca-Cola formula that we know of, different levels of variation in terms of the kind of artificial sweetener, the kind of flavor blend, the kind of labeling and naming and packaging have all been adapted to specific markets based on the fact that depending on what they know about the market, they have determined that on a legal level, there are certain things, for instance, they cannot do to Coca-Cola for it to be able to work in a particular market. So for instance, in the United States of America, there are certain kinds of artificial sweetener that have been banned, such that Coca-Cola cannot use that same artificial sweetener that they may use perhaps for a Diet Coke that they are selling in India. So they'll have to modify it to be able to ensure that they use the sweetener that is legally allowed and that will appeal to the consumers in that market. So when you look at the positioning of Coke Light, Diet Coke, and Coca-Cola, of the three, Coca-Cola Zero is the closest in terms of taste to the original Coca-Cola. However, the artificial sweetener that is used is slightly different from that which is used in the Diet Coke. So when you taste the two, there will be observable differences between them. And these are all targeted at different markets. So let's take the Ghanaian market, for example. I've seen a few people drinking Diet Coke around Ghana every now and then. However, it's not very common. And I remember when they tried to force Coca-Cola Zero on us, they had an expert marketing strategy that they thought would force the Ghanaian market to shift to drinking Coca-Cola Zero. Does anyone know this strategy that they used, or you didn't see it happening? Okay, so I think it happened one Christmas, right? And there was an artificial shortage of Coca-Cola, the original. Then all of a sudden, Coca-Cola Zero was all that was being offered, including at KFC. Who remembers this thing? Or maybe it happened so fast.
I do remember that.
Going on.
Yeah, they created an artificial shortage. Pardon?
Yes.
Yeah.
I said, I even think it's still going on, and Sprite as well. It's very difficult to find regular Sprites.
Yeah.
You are forced to buy Zero. Yes.
Right, because they want to force us into tasting it. And like I said, the Zeros are the closest in taste to the originals.
But
even though, yeah, they don't taste nice because it's sweetener. Sweetener will always have some kind of aftertaste.
Aftertaste, yes.
Right? So despite their best effort, exactly, Tara. Yes, Nigel, it has a black cover. That's the Coca-Cola Zero. Right? The red ones are the original, yes. Exactly, Nigel. All right. So, yes, Kwesi, please go ahead before we continue.
Doug, please, since on the case of Coke, I was just wondering, I've been wondering for some time now, what strategy did Pepsi use to take over the American market above Coke? Because you go to America and you say Coke and they look at you funny, but when you say soda, I want a Pepsi or soda, then then they give it to you. So I just want to know what strategy they used to overtake Coke from in the markets.
Okay, for the American market, I can't begin to tell exactly what strategy they use. You may have to do some research to be able to find that out. But in terms of, for America, there's North America and South America, right? I know in terms of South America, Pepsi has its origins in the Latin culture. Kwesi, are you there? Kwesi, are you there?
Yes, please.
Oh, okay, good. So Pepsi has its origins in the Latin culture, and they've always appealed to the Latin people. So generally, they have had a strong following from the Latin side of America, such that if you try to introduce Coca-Cola to a Latin person now, there'll be a problem because they see it as a part of their identity. And this goes down to the issue of branding, right? Branding is a very powerful tool, and you didn't do branding as a core course, did you? No.
No, we didn't.
So, yeah, branding is a fantastic tool that helps them to be able to create strategic competitive advantage, because branding goes so much beyond what we see in terms of product formulation and product sale and product promotion. Branding goes all the way to the mindset of the consumer. And influences them on a cognitive and psychological level, such that someone will cognitively identify with a particular brand, that the brand is them, to the point where it forms part of their identity. And if that brand is no longer available, they will not purchase any brand. It's like the way we have some die-hard soccer fans. Some people will just actually die for their soccer team. That's all branding.
Yeah.
Yeah. So some of the things we can't actually explain unless we actually do research to find out on the psychological level why the consumers are choosing this. And in branding, we have tools to do so. Sometimes what we cannot even answer with a survey, we even have machines that help us to scan the brain waves of consumers to see how their brain functions work when they see certain brands and when they see others. Because we can't explain on a physical level what is happening. Right? So it's not very straightforward, crazy. But I can say it's a branding thing.
Thank you.
You're welcome, Chrissy. I saw another hand up, or okay, it's gone back down.
Yeah, it was me.
Yes, Jemima, please go ahead.
I just dropped it. I think you've said it all because I was wondering what it is about this Coca-Cola Zero. I remember when I first set eyes on it, it was so appealing and people were rushing for it. I was then working at Koala. Then it was called Quatson's.
Wow, then that was a long time ago.
Yeah, and they brought this Coca-Cola Zero. You know, they bring in all sorts of things. And I was wondering why people were rushing for it because it got to a point where when you come, they have to reserve some for you at the wholesale. At the wholesale, yeah. People were like, and I'm like, what is it about this thing?
Yeah.
Well, you've said it all. So.
Yeah. But you realize that it didn't stick. And people went back to consuming the original Coca-Cola. And that was when they brought all different sizes of it. From that fat glass bottle.
I didn't pay attention to it at all because I don't know what it is. I'm like, I'm not that type who easily gets attracted to things. And
exactly.
I wasn't really bothered about it at all.
Yeah. But some portions of the Ghanaian populace are very fickle consumers, right? When something new comes, they all want to taste it.
Because they said they were dieting.
You see? And then after that, they just moved on. So thank you for sharing, Jemima, right? So like we've just mentioned, Coca-Cola is one of those companies that is employing standardization and adaptation in all manner of markets. And in Ghana here, they are trying it with the Coca-Cola Zero and the Sprite Zero, as we have observed, right? But this comes from astute strategic marketing, where they are trying their best to ensure that they put themselves in the best position to succeed in the market. So if they have a product that they believe they can position such that it will improve their position in the market and give them a leverage in terms of gaining a competitive advantage to succeed, then they will do so, right? Tara, please go ahead.
Okay, I have a question. Still on this Coke and Coke Zero issue. We just spoke about the artificial shortage that was created in Ghana to be able to push the zero, the zero agenda. Now, if they realize that the consumers were consuming regular Coke at a steady pace, why would you want to force zero on to the point where you actually had to intentionally make a shortage of what they like to try and push this down their throats? Wouldn't you think that if the sales are good with the regular Coke, you keep the regular Coke, and then in countries where maybe are more health or diet conscious, you rather push the diet agenda? Why would?
There could be 1,000,001 reasons. Off the top of my head, I could think of one, the fact that Coke has been under fire globally for the amount of sugar in the original Coca-Cola. They have actually single-handedly been accused for obesity in various countries.
Yes.
As a result of the Coca-Cola and its sugar content. So in my mind, maybe they are on this sustainability drive or CSR drive where they are trying to do better by getting consumers to eat better, right? So that is why they are pushing the Coke Zero. And it could also be that they have some economies of scale somewhere in manufacturing the Coke Zero. Such that they'll benefit more from selling more of the Coke Zero than the original Coca-Cola all over the world. So off the top of my head, those are the two things I think.
Force this in?
Okay.
Don't they know that they can't force people to eat what they don't want?
There's so in marketing we have an area called consumer behavior, right? And in consumer behavior literature, we have so many theories. And there's a particular theory that says that you can be able to introduce consumers to something that they did not know they want and make them want it by using certain tactics. So we have a very basic theory we refer to as the stimulus organism response theory. To be able to get consumers to adopt something that they do not originally like or even know about, we marketers create certain stimuli, right? So these stimuli will usually include actions. Sometimes we will do them at a subliminal level, at a psychological level. A lot of the adverts that we do include a lot of these tactics that we use to send certain stimuli to consumers. Then based on the stimuli, the organism will generate a response. Now, these stimuli are supposed to be attractive, such that the consumer will start wanting what we are selling to them without even knowing that they want it. And once they start wanting it, they would want to go and purchase it. And that's the response that we are looking for. So you realize that certain adverts, you watch them and they don't make sense. They are odd. But all of a sudden, you are sitting there one day and then you are hungry or something, and then the advert pops into your mind. Like this particular advert that Fun Ice had. For some reason, every time the weather is hot, I want to take a Fun Ice or a Fun Yogo, because they positioned it as this thirst quenching product that could quench your thirst. And the adverts always had people who were sweating and tired drinking the Fun Ice. So every time the weather is hot and I was sitting there, the advert would just come into my mind, and I'll like, so I have a lot of this their Fun Yogo drink in my house. I kid you not. Every time the weather is hot, I just pick one and I drink it. Then we have the avid beer drinkers. They liked Star for one reason. Star was positioned as the #1 beer for classy people who, after work, hang out and want to drink, and then they drink Star. Before it was Golda. Golda was not able to hold the position very long. They kicked Golda out, and then Star became the classy beer for the classy people. Portia, you said that's the position of Coca-Cola. I think it depends on who you ask. Right, but all these brands use subliminal marketing messages. Sometimes we even refer to them as stealth marketing techniques, where they sell the thing to you without you even knowing that you are being sold to. So you watch all these fast movies and you are seeing these expensive sports cars and Lamborghinis and Bentleys, and people are racing the cars. And then, so the moment someone wants to buy a fast car that will put them in a particular light, they want to either go and buy a Lamborghini or a Ferrari. These are all positioning tactics. I don't know who has watched the Fast and Furious franchise consistently before. There are certain classes of vehicles that you will see in these movies. Has anyone noticed that?
Yes.
Good. This is all.
They have a lot of American muscle cars in those as well.
Thank you. This is all subliminal positioning. They are selling it to you. Yeah. But a lot of people don't know. Sometimes you even watch a movie and you see certain products. I've seen the iPhone several times in so many different movies.
Yeah. And they even sell clothing. They even sell clothes.
Yeah.
And if I can add, I watched a short documentary some time ago that talked about how when Apple allows its products to be placed in movies, they never allow the bad guy to use Apple. Exactly. So if you see anyone using an Apple phone and he seems to be the bad guy at the beginning, no, he's not, because Apple does not place their products that way. I thought that was very interesting. So I started looking out for those when I'm watching movies.
Thank you. You see? These are all methods that we marketers refer to as stealth marketing. So they are stealthily selling it to you and you don't even know it. So by the time you realize, you develop some kind of affinity for it, because like she just mentioned, the good guys are always using iPhones. All right. So these are all ways by which marketers convince consumers to get things that they don't know they need. Right. Anita, you said you wanted Prada by force after watching The Devil Wears Prada. A lot of people started falling in love with designer labels after they watched that movie. The Devil Wears Prada exposed a lot of people to the world of high fashion and couture and wearing designer.
Really?
Yeah.
What movie is that?
The
Hey,
Devil Wears Prada.
I have to look for it.
For some people too, it was Ugly Betty.
Ugly Betty.
Who remembers
Okay.
Ugly Betty?
Hmm.
Tara, you do?
Yes,
Like you also
the lady
good.
with the glasses, with the very weird glasses.
Good. Yeah. There's still all these things to us, right? And we don't even know we are being sold to. So you wake up in the morning and your ambition is to own a designer bag. Yes, Kwesi?
I think that you are mentioning the wrong movies. I think they know La Superdora and the rest. That's what.
Oh no!
One
Oh
question.
no!
Are you joking?
That is not it. I've been busy. I haven't watched a movie in a very long time. So please, please, please.
It's just joking. I'm just joking.
I know, right?
Right, so back to the issue of standardization and adaptation, right? So firms would usually use a combination of these depending on what their objectives are. And like we said, their motivations for doing this could be myriad based on all we've discussed in our previous sessions. So let's go straight into the concept of product decisions and how firms make these decisions in terms of global marketing, right? Now, when it comes to product, the basic definition of a product is any good, service, or an idea, right? With both tangible and intangible attributes that collectively create value for a buyer or user. So in this case, we are establishing that a product could have both tangible attributes, which we can physically see and touch, like the weight of the product, its dimensions, the materials used to manufacture it. And then we can talk about the intangible aspects of the product, right? Where we are talking about things like the status associated with owning the product, the manufacturer's service commitment or the manufacturer's track record, or the country of origin, right? Which often gives a brand of a particular product its overall reputation or mystique, right? Like for a long time for men, when it came to men's footwear, it was all about Italian shoes, right? That's a whole intangible aspect because of country of origin. Italian shoes are supposed to have this kind of aura around them or mystique. To own an Italian shoe means that you are in a certain class, right? But that's just by the way. It's a typical example of how certain intangible attributes can influence how a product is perceived. So in terms of global marketing, firms would always consider the tangible aspects or attributes of a product and the intangible aspects or attributes of this product, right? So that being said, in creating an acceptable product for foreign markets, firms have to look at their total product offer in terms of both these tangible and intangible attributes. And aside that, the dimensions of a product include not just these tangible and intangible attributes, which are one of the general categorizations of products. However, we have other more in-depth categorizations of products, which even help us break down the products into more levels and layers, at which the firm can be able to design a product that is fit for a particular international market. So these product dimension could include not just the core physical properties of the product, but other additional elements, such as the packaging of the product, its branding, right? The service elements associated with it, including after-sales service, warranties, among others. All of these come together to make up the total product offer or the total package that the purchaser is buying. And for global marketing, the firm has to consider all these things in totality to be able to establish how to go about standardizing or adapting the product for the foreign markets that they wish to serve. So for the purposes of our discussion, we are looking at the product in terms of 3 levels, where we are considering the core product, where the core benefits of the product are. So as part of the core product, we can talk about its functional features. So if we talk about a cell phone, its functional features should include the fact that it should be able to make and receive phone calls. It should be able to help you to browse and access Wi-Fi. It should be able to help you to send messages, right? These are all basic functional features. And in terms of performance, the functional features of the phone should be such that after you charge it, it should be able to carry on for a number of days without going off, right? And it should have a certain level of technology to be able to perform all these functional features that we have talked about in order for it to have some kind of value for the person purchasing it. So at the core level, it is very, very possible that a firm can engage in standardization. And as we can see from the diagram, we can see that ranging from the bottom of the diagram we have to the top, the possibilities of standardizing the product elements are higher at the base where we have the core product benefits and become lower and lower as we move higher to the higher levels of the product. So for instance, standardizing core product benefits like functional features is very easy because basically every phone has to have those features, like making and receiving calls, sending text messages, enabling you to access Wi-Fi and be able to stream. However, when it comes to individual product attributes, the standardization then reduces where an adaptation approach becomes more probable. For instance, it is very easy to adapt brand name, as we can observe from the myriad brand names of various products and services that we have around us, right? Considering cell phones, once again, we have so many brands of cell phones, some of which are all owned by the same parent company. But because of the standardization and adaptation approach, they have adapted the different brand names of these phones for different markets. Likewise, the quality, you will realize that for various brands, again, using the cell phone example, they have cell phones of different quality levels, right? So when it comes to Samsung, they have the very high level quality Samsung phones, isn't it? Those that cost as much as the latest versions of the iPhones. And then they have the mid-class Samsung phones. Then they have the lower level ones, right? These are all as a result of the ability to adapt various product attributes like brand name and quality and packaging and size and color variants. Even Apple at some point has dabbled in adapting the product attributes of their famous iPhone. Who remembers the iPhone 5C?
I do.
Yeah.
With the colors. I think they came in blue, yellow, pink, and white, the smaller ones. Yes, and they were cheaper as well.
Exactly, right? So even the most accomplished multinational companies who are deemed to be experts in the area of global marketing have dabbled in some degree of juxtaposition between standardization and adaptation, some doing so successfully and others failing woefully. Currently, the 5C is even nowhere to be seen anywhere in the system, right? So product attributes are another level where the firm can be able to engage in some high level of adaptation. Whereas when we move a step above to the support services, it is very unlikely that you can be able to standardize the provision of those services, given the nature of these services and how they are implemented in different countries. For instance, in Ghana here, when you buy a product, there is no guarantee that the person you are buying the product from will take it back and give you your money back if you have a problem. True or false?
True.
Very
Good.
true.
But in other countries, it is a law. The customer should have the opportunity to return the product if they don't like it. It doesn't even have to have a fault. If they don't like it, they can return it within a certain period and get their full money back or exchange it for store credit. Right? Likewise, in other parts of the world, when it comes to guarantees for products and services that you purchase, there are certain laws that indicate certain kinds of guarantees you have to give for different kinds of products and services. But in our part of the world, it is very different. You buy a product and you've bought it. If you get home and it doesn't work, your money is gone. You can't go back and say you want your money back. Elizabeth, please go ahead.
Yes, please. I think now what they do is that no refund, but only replacement. So if you have a problem and you come with it, they only replace it for you, but they can't give you your money back.
Exactly.
But I think
that is for
for
those
now,
who even
because
choose
of
to do it, isn't it?
Yes, yes. But I think for now, because of the influx of this multinationals, now I think that is a bit changing now, because you can actually go to a shop that, if you know if the business is actually a multinational, you can actually go and then return your items you bought. I've had a couple of experiences here, but even with that, it would be very difficult for them to give you the money back. They would only replace it for you.
Exactly. Yes. Right. Thank you so much for sharing, Elizabeth. Tara, please go ahead.
Yes, and I was going to say that companies or organizations that do that as well also just make it easier for people to shop with them. So your decision as to where to make a purchase, you would look at which store would be easy to return to if you had any problems. And even in terms of financial products, like I know, for example, with American Express, if you have an issue with a charge, a fraudulent charge, they don't make you jump through hoops and filling out a million forms and asking all these questions. As soon as you make a call or use the app and tell them that this is a fraudulent charge, they immediately take it off your bill. You don't have to fight it, and then they do the background work. So that makes it more attractive for people to
very
use.
true. Yes. Please, I want to come in a bit. I remember that I bought I subscribed to a particular app that was Air Translate, and then I wanted to use a particular feature, and they told me that I have to actually upgrade it. But I don't know what actually happened to me. It was 2 weeks trial, but I don't know, for some weird reason, I was thinking it was 2 years. So I actually subscribed to it. I woke up one morning and I think I had been, debited with some $50, and I didn't understand. So quickly, I sent, a message. I sent an email to Apple, and then within some few days, my money was returned to me. So I was very, very impressed, because in Ghana, you hardly see some of these things happen.
Exactly, right? So you realize that it depends on the organization and the approach that they have decided to use, right? So we have all observed that in terms of the ability to standardize and adapt, it comes down to the organization's strategy and whatever they have decided to do in terms of their global marketing mix when it comes to their product. And the higher we go in terms of the model that we see in front of us, based on the levels of the product, from the core product benefits all the way up to support services, it is easier to standardize at the base. But as you move higher, it becomes more and more difficult to standardize because of the various nuances and contextual differences that firms experience when they are marketing in foreign markets. So thank you all for your various insights that you shared. Very, very resourceful. And for those in the comments, I see they say goods bought are not returnable. Yes, Harold, very common in Ghana. Barbara says Palace Mall will refund your money. Awesome. So ladies and gentlemen, Palace Mall is one of those places you would like to be shopping. Okay, so let's go on. So in terms of standardizing the product versus standardizing of a service, I'd like us to understand the fact that in terms of standardization and adaptation, it is much easier to standardize elements of a product, particularly at the core level, as well as its attributes, than it is to standardize support services, which we have just seen. And we see that with a lot of global brands, they find it very easy to standardize the core product and modify or adapt various elements of the product attributes and support services. So a typical example is this very popular snack that we all consume, known as Twix. In some parts of the world, it is called Radar, right? And was called Radar for a very long time, until recently they decided that, okay, everywhere in the world, it should be called Twix. However, it was the same product in the packaging. The only difference was that in other parts of the world, like in Denmark, Finland, Norway, Sweden, and Turkey, it was called Radiance, but the contents within were the same. So here it's a classic representation of standardizing the core products and then modifying or adapting other product attributes. The same goes for the sachet versions of popular products by brands like Unilever, who manufacture Dove shampoo and conditioner. Now bear in mind that they do not manufacture Dove shampoo and conditioner for the Ghanaian market. However, we find it on our market because it is imported independently by other supermarkets or distributors from other countries for sale in Ghana, right? And in countries like India and Indonesia, there are sachet versions of these products. Now, the sachet versions are not even available in Ghana. I've never seen a sachet version of any of these products in Ghana before. Right? So you realize that the content is the same. It's the same Dove shampoo that is in the bottle that they put in the sachet. But particularly for the Indian and Indonesian market, they decided that in terms of the attributes, they will not put it in big bottles for purchase, but they will put it in sachets, considering various factors in that context, including their economic situation. Given that people in those markets will find it difficult to buy a whole bottle of shampoo at a certain price. However, it will be easier for them to buy a sachet of shampoo, which they can conveniently afford and use for a period until they have enough resources to afford another sachet or set of sachets, right? Marianne says, same for some Nestle products. Exactly. Ideal Milk in Ghana has sachet versions, right? But in other countries, like the Francophone countries, it's called Gloria. Exactly. Right? But it's the same milk by a different name. And in Ghana here, we have the Ideal Milk sachet versions. We have the actual milk in the sachet, which is the same as the liquid one in the tin. And then now we have the powdered milk versions, isn't it? So these are all examples of product adaptation to suit the needs of different consumers in different markets. So thank you, Marianne, for that contribution. However, when it comes to services, services by nature and by virtue of their core characteristics are variable in nature, period. So that means that there is no way that you can say that you are standardizing service provision in every country. You may be able to standardize certain aspects of the tangibles or the physical evidence, like for instance, the premises in which the service is delivered. Do you agree?
Yes.
Good.
Yeah.
But in terms of the actual delivery of the service, there is no way you can standardize it because of the human interaction involved. So when it comes to products and services, products are more prone to standardization than services are. And with services, you do not have a choice than to adapt for whichever markets you enter into, right? So that being said, let's look at some forms of product adaptation. Now, there are two main forms of product adaptation we can identify. The first one is mandatory adaptation, which is the kind of adaptation that is required by law, where without it, your product cannot enter a market or will be unable to perform its function there, right? So for example, we have all these electrical appliances that are designed, for different countries or different markets. And you realize that based on the power supply in different markets, the voltage situations are different, isn't it?
Yes, that's true.
So an item designed for the US market, if you take it to the UK and you plug it directly into the mains without doing anything to it, you may have some problems, right? So you need to be able to ensure that your electrical appliance is designed in line with the electrical voltage that is being used in the country that you are exporting it into. And sometimes because of the nature of the design of the electrical voltage, they use certain kinds of plugs in these countries. So as we can see from the diagram in the slide, depending on the country you're going to, the plug has to look different. For the UK, you usually see the square plugs, isn't it? Nigel says some countries have appliances built to take about 240 volts due to their power system, but in the USA, many appliances have the capacity for 110 volts. Exactly. Right? So that's a typical example of mandatory adaptation. And again, we can bring in the example of the left-hand driving, which is very popular in European countries like the UK. Jemima, please go ahead.
Doc, please. I was having a network problem.
Okay.
So I didn't hear all that you said. Please.
In terms of the mandatory adaptation.
Yes, you were talking about appliances and certain products that were manufactured for a particular country, like the US or the UK.
Yeah, we were talking about electrical appliances. and the fact that different countries have different voltage systems in terms of their electricity consumption. So if you are designing an appliance for that market, you need to design it such that it will suit the voltage system in that country. And Nigel graciously added in the comments that some countries have appliances built to take about 240 volts. But in the USA, many appliances have the capacity for only 110 volts, right? So thereby emphasizing the example we were giving in terms of the mandatory adaptation of electrical appliances to various foreign markets. Jemima, are you okay now?
Yes, please.
Awesome. So you realize that Ghanaians will go and import appliances from Japan and the US, and they'll bring it to Ghana and they'll change the sockets. Please, have you seen that happening before?
Yes.
They'll cut off the plug and change it to.
Yes. When I was in secondary school, it was mandated that we have to do all that to make it 3 pins or something.
Exactly.
Because the irons we were taking to school, most of them were 2 pins. Then we had to change it to 3 pins.
Exactly. Right? This is the reason, because people are importing things from foreign markets, right, to other markets where they are not exactly well suited. So certain modifications have to be made, right? So that is for mandatory adaptation. Yes, Tara, very quickly before we proceed, please go ahead.
Okay, sure. That so I know you just said that sometimes people change the plugs, but then sometimes too, I think that the manufacturers actually sell the product without a plug on it, because I remember a while ago I bought a step down transformer. Good. And it didn't come with a plug, so I was very surprised. We got home, took it out of the box. Good. And there was no plug. So I was just very confused. So we had to call an electrician to come and fix one on for us. But that was the first time I'd ever seen anything like that, and I was a little traumatized. Yeah.
That is the company's response to the mandatory adaptation, isn't it? Rather than waste money buying plugs to fit on products going to different markets, they will not put a plug at all, isn't it?
Yes. That's what. And
then leave it for you. When you buy it in your market, the plug that suits your market, buy it and put it on it.
Put it on it.
Smart move. Very smart.
But Doc, when you buy these things, they come with a voltage, right?
Yes, they do.
Or it's just the plug.
They do.
Because if US is using 110 and you bring that appliance to Ghana and you change the plug, the customer buys it, takes it home, and it blows.
Good.
You see, so at the end of the day, you can even burn your home because of these things.
Good.
Just have to be careful.
Good. You see, Jemima, these are some of the things. So that's how when I was saying it, I was laughing. The way the electrician, that's how I was laughing, because they are doing it out of ignorance.
Yeah. You can burn your home.
Yeah. Yeah, Mensa, please go ahead. Thank you for sharing, Jemima.
Mine is a question.
Yes.
On the one hand, companies want to standardize because it's cheaper.
Yep.
And we have globalization.
Yep.
And we have the whole world trying to move to a common point.
Yes, please.
So if the ladies would have noticed, if they read the manuals of the products they buy, for instance, if you buy a TV, it has a voltage range of around 110 to 240, meaning that it can be used both in the US. So I want to ask, these mandatory requirements, how much life do they have in them?
How much
do you foresee? Do you foresee these things being eroded with the world moving towards a unified market, or there's still, with the advent of protectionism, you'd still think that these mandations would continue to have a long shelf life, if I should put it?
I believe they will continue. I believe they will continue because some of these rules are put in place sometimes to protect certain sectors and industries. Sometimes it's not really in consideration of global marketing or the world being global. So they want to be able to sell to everybody. Sometimes it's about putting in place certain barriers to prevent certain people from entering into certain sectors within certain geographic locations. So you realize that some countries will actually go ahead to pass these things into law And very soon I'll show you one of such laws that has been passed in terms of EU standards for packaging. And they have various of such laws and standards for the nature of and standard of various products and services that can enter into the EU. And they don't have the same rules for EU member countries, bear in mind, yeah. So when Britain exited the EU, they started to suffer from a lot of these restrictions and standards which they used to benefit from as a result of their membership in the EU. So if you ask me, I think it is going to continue. And smart organizations will try to find ways to get around it. Like, for instance, this example Tara gave us. The organization is not mandated to fit in this mandatory electrical requirement of designing a plug that fits a particular location for each of the products in each of the markets they are selling to, because they have decided not to include a plug at all. So they have escaped having to answer this question of why don't you have the plug that corresponds to our country? So if you ask me, I think it will continue. Okay, great. And then the other one, which is a bit obvious, is optional adaptation, right? Where the firm decides which element of their marketing mix in terms of products they want to adapt to suit the markets that they want to serve, right? And Oreo is a very typical example. Oreo is a very popular classic snack, where every time you mention Oreo, people's mind go to the chocolate biscuit with the white filling in the middle. However, Oreo realized that in different markets, there are different tastes and preferences, such that in some Asian markets, for instance, they do not appreciate the fast juxtaposition between the sour taste of the chocolate cookie with the very sweet white filling, right? So they had to bring some taste that was close enough to the customers in these markets to get them to appreciate the Oreo and purchase it. So they introduced green Oreo filling, which was made, yes, Tara, matcha Oreos, right? Then the Oreos with the green tea Oreos for the people in Japan, right? Who like consuming a lot of tea, including green tea. And then the orange filling of the Oreo for the Chinese, right? And they have other flavors of Oreo in different parts of the world, especially in the US, just to accommodate different tastes and preferences. So this is a typical example of optional adaptation where the firm decides what to adapt and what not to adapt. In any case, there are other brands that have just decided not to change anything about their products. They sell the same thing in all parts of the world out of their own free will. And we see this a lot with the couture brands that we've been purchasing. It's the same bag that you will get if you buy a couture or designer handbag in Ghana, assuming the designer shop was here. You would buy the same thing that you would have bought if it was in a United States shop or in any other part of the world. So product adaptation can be either mandatory or optional. So we have several examples. For instance, the popular Red Bull that we've been consuming has been traditionally designed with this blue and silver packaging, with the Red Bull and the energy drink written in red. And this has worked in various markets, right? However, in the Chinese market, this didn't do well at all, because the Chinese have different understanding of these red and this blue and silver juxtaposition on the packaging. So Red Bull did a whole overhaul and redesigned their packaging for China by making the can itself gold, given that in China, gold signifies wealth and happiness. And then they put the two bulls in the middle with red, just like in the old Red Bull can, which symbolizes good luck for the Chinese, right? So you realize that the blue is more muted in the Red Bull design for the Chinese markets, and the gold and the red is more pronounced. You notice that the bulls are bigger on the Chinese version of the Red Bull than on the original Red Bull that we all know. This is another typical example of product adaptation to suit the needs of a specific market. And then the typical Barbie example that Tara helped us give. This is the Barbie that we all have known of for a long time. But right now, based on the backlash they got from their standardized approach, they have adapted to all manner of Barbie, including different skin tones for different people suffering from different skin conditions, for people from different backgrounds. They also have different sizes, different heights. They have short Barbies, tall Barbies, dark Barbies, chocolate Barbies, Barbies with straight hair, Barbies with curly hair, Barbies with colored hair. And they didn't stop at the female dolls. They went on to customize for the male dolls as well, right? Where from the traditional Ken that we all knew to the new design of Ken Barbie dolls, who also have different stature, different structures, different sizes, and different looks to match the redesign of the female Barbies, right? Peter, the damage has already been done. I know, right? But they are making a lot of money as a result of this in different markets. So the damage was done, but they made a very good recovery, right? And that is the beauty of marketing. Once you are able to identify where there are problems and come up with a strategy that works, you can be able to recover, right? So like we have discussed, there's an option to adaptation and standardization as well, which a lot of people fail to talk about, but it's very popular in terms of product development, where it is all about the firm being able to invent something that they believe that they cannot adapt their existing product to create, right? So if the firm believes that what they have, they cannot be able to adapt it enough to suit a particular market, they will redesign the whole thing by creating a new version that is actually dedicated to consumers in this market. And we see this a lot with the textbooks that we use. Have you noticed that? Have you noticed that the textbook that you use come in different versions for different markets?
No, I don't think I paid attention to that.
Okay, so for Pearson books
The Good News Bible for Africa.
Yeah.
we have
I
international
think for
version.
Pearson and Kaplan,
Yeah,
I've
the
seen
same,
some
all of them. We
differences.
have international version, global edition. Then we have versions dedicated to specific countries.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. So for instance, this is a typical
You're
example, right? This is the newest version of the brand management book that I used to teach branding. And I was invited to the launch of the Indian edition, which bear in mind has been in existence for a long time. But because they relaunched a new version, the Indians also felt that they also have to launch a new version. So these are both strategic brand management. You can see that. They are both the 5th edition. But the one on the left is for India. And the one on the right is for everybody. And you will notice that the one designed for India is targeted at Indians, such that almost all the examples in the book are Indian examples, because it was designed specifically for the Indian market. Even though the authors who wrote the original one, which is the global edition, have been included in the process of writing the Indian edition. So now that you know, just pay attention. Some of your books, you will see that they are the same books, but the covers will be different. One will say international edition, the other one will say global edition. Some will also boldly write, not for sale outside the United States of America. Have you seen that one before?
Yes, I've seen that.
Good. That is because it was designed specifically for the American market. And you'll notice that all the examples therein are American examples. If you read it, you may not get it. So that is it for product invention. And like I mentioned, in terms of product decisions, branding is also a key component. Yes, Elizabeth, please go ahead.
Yes, I'm now beginning to understand why, I'm a teacher.
Yeah.
And then for our exams, we have a whole lot of variants. So we have an exam for the Indians. We have even for the same level, that is the O levels, we have the O levels and we have the IGCSEs. So the O level is for some typical countries, and then the IG is actually for international countries, so other countries. Good. So as much as we have exams that is suited for people living in different places, we have ones that are also targeted towards some specific countries. Exactly. And then we have even India, we have just something separate for India too.
Good. Thank you very much for sharing, Elizabeth. That's very illuminating.
Welcome.
Right? So it's very much at play in various sectors across the world. Right? So that is it for product invention, right? Now, in terms of branding in product decisions, you realize that, like I mentioned, branding helps firms to do a lot of this global marketing strategizing. And that is because branding goes deeper in terms of influencing consumer perceptions and actions, right? By distinguishing a company's offering and differentiating it from the competition, creating some kind of identity for their product or service, and creating awareness for it as well. It also guarantees a certain level of quality and satisfaction, right? Which helps the firm to be able to promote their product or service very easily. And as a result, branding is a key part of global marketing mix strategy when it comes to product decisions. And we see a lot of this happening around us, with firms applying different alternatives of branding, each having advantages and disadvantages depending on which one they choose and where they apply it. So you realize that a lot of manufacturers use their own brand, sometimes in every market. However, you will also see manufacturers using their own brand as a single brand in a single market, where you will not find that particular brand being sold in any other market. At the same time, too, you can have a brand that decides to have multiple brands under its company name being sold to a single market. So a typical example is the Transsion example that I gave you. Transsion Holdings has multiple brands being sold in the Ghanaian market alone. They own the Infinix brand, the Techno brand, and the itel brand, all of which are being sold in Ghana. We also see a typical example of this with Nestle and Unilever. They have Omo, Sunlight, all washing powders being sold in the same market. So we can also talk about the multiple market local brand approach, where firms target multiple markets and design local brands for these markets. Who remembers Royco Dawa Dawa?
Yes, I do. Me.
It was meant for our market, even though it didn't do so well. It's
Maggie Monko.
Maggie Monko.
It disappeared immediately.
Immediately. And right now they brought back Maggie there.
That one too is suffering in a way.
Yes, because they introduced it in a very sneaky way by creating an artificial shortage of Maggie shrimp. You didn't notice that one? Huh? When Maggie there came, you couldn't find Maggie shrimp anywhere on the market. And they even convinced the market women, they convinced the market women to convince those who come to the market to buy the dede instead of looking for Maggie shrimp. Anyway, those are the nuances of marketing strategy. So these are all branding alternatives that firms can use, right? Again, in terms of packaging, there are elements of standardization and adaptation, right? Packaging is basically how the product comes in terms of how it is designed to help its preservation, as well as to help its movement during shipping, right? And as it is being kept at various retail locations, as well as at the point of use and consumption, to ensure that the product is preserved. Now you realize that globally, packaging is moving towards what we refer to as eco-packaging because of issues of climate change and the global environment. So a lot of organizations and unions have come up with various rules and standards regarding how packaging must be designed. So depending on the market that you are entering into and the rules that apply there are certain levels of standardization that have to be observed when it comes to your packaging and how the labeling on the packaging is also done. Now that of the ISO organization, which is the International Organization for Standards, is the ISO 18,600, which has to do with the standardization of packaging and its environmental impact. Now, this is more of an independent standardization that firms can decide to go in for, right? But when you are going to a country like the EU, they have a whole set of standards that are built around packaging and how packaging must be communicated. I have the document here. There are different versions of it, so you can be able to find them and read them. But I'll upload this one as part of your resources so that you can familiarize yourself with its content. So this one is the SEN standards, which is a group of standards that the European Union has implemented regarding packaging and the environment. So it goes in depth and into detail about how packaging of products that are brought into the EU must look like, right? And how they should be able to be presented in order to be acceptable into EU countries, right? So I would do my best to put it as part of your resources so that you can be able to look at it and then see its content and experience it for yourself, right? We are a bit behind, so I want us to be able to catch up and then finish what we have to finish for today. So that is it for packaging. And as part of the SEN guidelines, which I just talked about, which refers to the European Committee for Standardization, these are some of the provisions therein. The packaging has to meet standards for reuse. They also have to meet requirements for packaging in terms of its recoverability and recyclability, right? That it also has to meet requirements in terms of how biodegradable it is and how the material can be composted. All of these are requirements that are enshrined in these standards that I'm talking about. So you need to be conversant with them and understand the laws that apply in the different contexts that you want to enter into by way of packaging for the products that you wish to sell in these markets. Still on the matter, we can see that firms also like to adapt their packaging depending on specific regions that they want to enter into. So these two are the same laundry detergents, right? But when you look at the design of the bottles and the way it is packaged, it looks almost like it is made for two different markets. David, do we have such laws in Ghana at all? I doubt it. Otherwise, we will not have a waste and sanitation problem. Right? So I don't think so. Okay, so still on the matter of packaging. So you can see that the one on the left is designed for the Middle Eastern market, right? Where the Saudi Arabians are wearing mostly these black long garments and they are usually covered up. So for the fact that this laundry detergent is designed for the washing of black clothes, it makes sense to customize the packaging to present the product in the light that it will help them to be able to wash the black garment that they wear more often. And then in other parts of Europe where they don't necessarily wear these black garments and hoods over their heads, it is to help them wash their black clothing, which they wear very often. So you realize that the models that are used on both bottles reflect the dressing style of people in these different contexts. So that's another way in which packaging can be used to be able to adapt a product to various markets. In this case, it's just the packaging that is different. The contents in the bottle are basically the same, right? The same for Axe and Lynx. At some point, Axe deodorant was very popular in Ghana here among our gentlemen, right? And they are basically the same product. One is called Axe, and that is sold in the UK, Ireland, that is sold in other countries, whereas the Lynx is sold in the UK, Ireland, Australia, and China. And this is basically because the Lynx was introduced after the Axe had been introduced in other countries. And when they were ready to introduce the Axe into these other countries, being the UK, Ireland, Australia, and China, Axe had already been registered and trademarked by someone else. So they couldn't use the name Axe again in these markets. So they had to use another name. So they chose to go for Lynx. But you realize that the packaging looks virtually the same and the contents in the container are the same. It's just the primary name that needs to be adapted to suit the conditions in these other foreign markets. Please, I hope what I'm saying makes sense.
Yes, it does.
Good.
Yes.
We see the same thing for the popular cereal that we all consume, right? This is Cocoa Krispies. It doesn't look like what we see in Ghana, is it? The Krispies we see in Ghana are what? White. And they are packaged in a blue box, isn't it? Or you don't take breakfast cereal.
Are you
I
talking
don't know
about the
one.
Rice
This is
Krispies?
what too.
You know Rice
Rice
Krispies, right? So this is very weird to you. But this is how it is presented to the Americans. They don't have Rice Krispies. They have Cocoa Krispies. Right? And in other countries like Mexico, it is Choco Krispies with an elephant. And then in the United Kingdom is the one we all know, Cocoa Pops. Aha. We take Cocoa Pops. Right? But in other parts of the world like Portugal, they also know Choco Krispies. with a different spelling, right? But this particular one, if we had seen it in our dreams, we would have thought, this is Rice Krispies. Why is it saying Cocoa Krispies? These are all examples of all the different nuances that you realize companies are utilizing in terms of adapting products for different markets. Oh, okay, so you eat kenke and wache. Oh, sorry. I just assumed you would know about these things. Please forgive me if I made a wrong assumption. Okay, but these are all typical examples of adaptation for different markets, right? Again, we can see it in terms of labeling. Like we saw in the other example with the laundry detergent, you realize that the labeling of one detergent had a different language, and the other detergent also had a different language. And that is because it is taking cognizance of the language differences in these contexts or regions to make sure that people who are buying these products can be able to read the ingredients and the directions for use, so that they can effectively understand them and use the products as they were intended to be used, right? So that is it for labeling. Labeling must also take cognizance of contextual differences for the purposes of adaptation, right? So we all know KFC, and KFC is very popular in different parts of the world. However, when it came to a country like Canada, it had to be changed from KFC to PFK. Now, PFK is the French version of Kentucky Fried Chicken. So Kentucky Fried Chicken translated into French is Poulet Frit Kentucky. And that is because this KFC was being introduced in Quebec, which is a French-speaking province in Canada. And they have rules there that say that because the people there are predominantly French-speaking, the names of all businesses must be translated into French. So regardless of how popular the name of your company is, like KFC, if it is going to Quebec, it has to be translated into French. So in this case, KFC directly translated into French is what? Poulet for chicken, frit for fried, and then the Kentucky. You see, they didn't have a French word for Kentucky, so they kept the Kentucky. Please, does that make sense?
Yes, Doc, it does.
Yes, it does.
Okay, so these are all levels of adaptation, right? In terms of product packaging and labeling and its constituents. Even with KFC, when you go to Nigeria, the KFC chicken that is served in Nigeria is a bit harder than what is served in Ghana. Has anyone chewed KFC in Nigeria before?
No, I haven't.
Good, good. These are all contextual differences, which firms will usually adapt to, right? So Coca-Cola, again, our famous example, has different packaging for different contexts. This is packaging for Coca-Cola Japan. This is packaging for Coca-Cola Russia, right? This is how they say Coca-Cola in Russia. They say Coca-Cola, right? If we heard it, we would think it is a joke, but it is actually the Russian pronunciation of Coca-Cola. Emmanuel, can you kindly mute yourself? You are disturbing us, and I'm unable to mute you for some reason. Okay. All right. Okay. So like I said, with Coca-Cola, again, they are the masters of standardization and adaptation, isn't it? And they do it very seamlessly in different parts of the world. We've seen the Coca-Cola Japan packaging. We've seen the Coca-Cola Russia packaging. And then this is the Coca-Cola packaging in South Korea, right? So you realize that they adapt to suit the needs of every market. And with that, we've come to the end of product decisions. Now, let's quickly go through pricing decisions. So in terms of pricing decisions, we need to think about the fact that when it comes to price, it's basically the amount of money that is expected, required, or given in exchange for something. So in terms of the product or service that the firm is selling abroad, they need to determine how much money they want in exchange for this product or service that they are selling. Now, product being one of the elements of the marketing mix that is very easily changed, you realize that a lot of firms rely on modifying the price elements for various markets as a quick fix to be able to see short-term results when it comes to implementing their marketing programs, right? However, quick fixes with price do not always last. So you realize that if you decide to introduce your product into the market by reducing the price and selling it as a discount, after some point, the discount now becomes something that is no longer attractive to the customer base, because a discount that runs for too long becomes circumspect, isn't it? Consumers will now start asking themselves questions. Why is it so cheap for this long? Sarah, you wanted to say something?
No, I was just agreeing with you.
Yeah. They'll start asking, why is it so cheap for so long? Is it going bad? Is it expiring? Is there something wrong with the products that they are offering it so cheap? Consumers will start asking questions. So even as much as firms decide to use price as one of the key components to fix aspects of their global marketing strategy, they shouldn't rely on it too much, given that it is not a permanent fix. That will always be in the interest of the firm. Jemima, please go ahead.
Yeah, there was a shop there. I don't know if they're still there, but a shop by name UK Brands. They did a sale which was on for more than 3 months. And I was wondering why it was like that.
Exactly.
But I later realized that the things they were selling, not everything was of good quality. Most of them were not very good.
Exactly. And now they have closed down their Marina Mall branch for those who go to UK Brands. And their Crown Mall branch has also been closed for some time now. So perhaps the company is having issues. But Jemima, very keen observation. Nigel, you said you always check expiry dates when products are ridiculously cheap. Exactly. Because discounts and reduced pricing that go on for too long begin to arouse suspicion, right? Even when you give discounts or you reduce prices, depending on the kind of products you're reducing the prices on, it will always arouse some kind of suspicion. And you'll have to do extra work to convince consumers that no other aspects of the product have been compromised to warrant that price reduction, right? So when it comes to global marketing, firms have to be able to set their pricing objectives and decide the strategy they are going to use to approach the achievement of these pricing objectives. And these objectives could be anywhere in the area of the amount of returns they want to get on their investment, the profits that they want to make, right? Or the amount of recovery they want to make from what they spent when they were developing the product for sale in this foreign market. These are all different kinds of objectives that the firm can decide to put in place with regard to their pricing and set in motion strategies to be able to adopt them. So in terms of pricing decisions, there are different pricing approaches that firms can decide to use. These include 1, penetration pricing, 2, market skimming, 3, captive pricing, and then 4, market pricing. We are going to take each of these one after the other, and then we will dissect them, starting from penetration pricing. So penetration pricing is usually used by firms who want to use their price as a competitive weapon. So they'll enter the market usually pitching their product at the lowest price below their competitors in the market, such that they'll look at the least price that their competitors are selling the product at and price their products below it. So they're doing so to be able to make sure that the product is priced low enough to help them get more customers to buy, to quickly build their market share. In other cases too, it helps them to be able to get as much benefit from the market before imitators come in and imitate the products which they have so struggled to develop for sale in this particular market. Right? It seems in the comments, Ghanaians are very skeptical of these various pricing strategies, and for good reason, because a lot of people have ended up getting scammed, right? But back to our point of discussion. So in terms of penetration pricing, it's all about pricing the product very low. Sometimes the organization would risk selling at a loss just to make sure that they are able to safely enter this foreign market without rattling the competition and getting the customer's attention. And this makes it very unlikely that a person who is a first-time exporter would use something like penetration pricing, because first-time exporters usually don't know much about the market, much less know about the competitor strategies and their pricing policies. So this type of pricing is usually for experienced organizations who have been in the business of selling their products and services in various markets for a long time and are okay with even selling the product at a low point where they will make a loss in order to gain access into this new foreign market. So that is penetration pricing. Then the next strategy is market skimming. And market skimming is the opposite of penetration pricing, where they would deliberately sell the product at a premium to reach a particular market segment who are willing to pay this premium price, often to be able to get this particular product that is of a certain level of quality, which they want to have exclusively, right? A typical example is the iPhone club that we know of. It is for a certain premium market segment. And this particular strategy of market skimming is usually pursued by firms who are seeking to use a differentiation strategy that will position their product as a premium product. And again, we will agree that brands like Apple have succeeded in doing this with their iPhone and with their Mac computers, where they are ranked in the range of premium products when we are talking about cell phones and computers. Please, would you all agree?
Yes.
Yeah, Mac is a Mac.
Yes.
So that is market skimming, right? And in terms of the skimming pricing strategy, firms would usually benefit from this strategy when the product is in its introductory stage of the product life cycle. Now, when we talk about the product life cycle, it proceeds in 4 stages in relation to the sales of the item over time. So when the product is introduced, you realize that there are few people who know about it, and therefore it has not gained much traction in terms of the marketplace. So sales are somewhat low. However, as the product becomes more popular and common in the marketplace during the growth stage, you realize that sales begin to gradually increase until it gets to the maturity stage where you realize that the sales slow down over time until they ultimately decline. However, this is not a one-size-fits-all for every product category, especially when we are talking about technology products. Because you realize that by the virtue of the characteristics and nature of technology, the technology is always evolving such that they do not wait for a particular technology product to mature and decline before they introduce a new one. Please, does that make sense?
Yes.
Good.
Yeah.
So Apple will not wait for the old model to get to the maturity level and decline. They will introduce a new one even before the product sales begin to fall.
Security money.
Good. Meaning that they are always in the market to be able to make sure that they have a product that is commanding market skimming ability.
Thank you.
Right? So you realize that even when new versions of the iPhone are introduced, the older versions don't necessarily become too cheap. Have you noticed?
That's very true.
Yes.
Yes.
That's very true.
People would still want to buy the old versions even when new ones have been introduced.
Good.
Because they are still very high in the system.
Exactly. Right? And that is because of Apple's market skimming strategy that they have not reneged on. And it has created a premium level image and reputation for their product. Right? So that is it for the market skimming approach. Then we can talk about captive pricing. And this is a very smart form of pricing, where the pricing of the products are done based on how they come in the form of a bundle. So you realize that certain products are in bundled form such that you need other products in order to use them. So you get a core product, and then you need an accessory to be able to use that core product. Now, this accessory is also referred to as the captive product, because you get to purchase the core product once, but to keep on using the core product, you need to consistently purchase and repurchase the captive product or the accessory product. A typical example of companion products of this nature are razors and blades, which help the Gillette razor blade brand to make their fortune. Another example is video game consoles and video games or gaming software. Most of the money that comes from the gaming industry is made from the sale of the gaming software and not the consoles. If you ask companies like Microsoft who manufacture the Xbox, they can be able to reliably tell you that in some instances, they have made losses on the sale of the Xbox. However, they were able to recoup that money through the captive products that came with the console, which in this case is the games. And we see it with a lot of other products that we use every day in our offices and in our homes and in our daily lives. A typical example is printers and ink cartridges. You realize how cheap it is to get the printer. However, it is very expensive to be buying the refill cartridges. So sometimes, as a result of how expensive the cartridges are, people will prefer a particular printer brand over the other. Currently, people dislike Canon printers so much because of how expensive the cartridges are. They'd rather go in for an HP that has a relatively more affordable cartridge because they will have to be buying it consistently over time. And if you can't buy the cartridge, the printer becomes useless. Tara, please go ahead.
I also think that sometimes when the manufacturers want to phase that out and they probably realize that they're coming to an end and they want to keep the sales going, then the cartridges become extinct. You're not able to get them.
Good.
So after maybe a number of years, you are forced to now buy again a new printer. And then for the next 5 or 6 years, you are buying cartridges again. So they just keep that cycle going. So you can't even
so
just—
you're a captive, aren't you, Tara? It makes you a captive. Very smart marketing, huh? Elizabeth, please go ahead. Thank you for sharing that, Tara. Elizabeth.
Yes, please.
Yes,
can you hear me?
Go ahead. Yes, I can.
I was just thinking of this in terms of the retail retailers.
Hello? Is someone speaking alongside? Elizabeth, please go ahead.
Okay, so I was saying that most of these retailers, I don't know if that is what they this is what they call the captive pricing.
Yes.
Because I thought that it was called loss leaders, where they have a number of items in the shop and they have some that, especially the fast moving consumable ones, they price those ones very, very cheap. Then the other ones would also be expensive, and those ones are actually the ones on the shelves and all that. And then the fast moving ones would just be probably at the entrance, the ones you meet quickly when you actually enter a shop. So maybe you would want to buy a tin of milk.
Where you can distinguish between captive and loss leader. Captive is where without one, you cannot use the other.
Okay.
Good. So it's like one is holding you captive. But with loss leader, you either buy one or you buy the other, isn't it?
Yes.
Good.
Yes. They are
captive,
not.
You can't use one without the other. You can't use a printer without a cartridge. You can't use the coffee makers without those small coffee pots that they manufactured to go with it. If you don't buy airtime, your SIM card becomes useless.
Useless, yes.
All right.
I understand that.
Great, Elizabeth. Great. Right, good, Harold. Captive pricing works excellently with complementary goods because they go hand in hand. You can't do without them. Okay, all right. So aside captive pricing, we have what we refer to as market pricing. Okay, David, you said what? I should recap the captive pricing. Okay, so generally what I said about captive pricing is that the pricing is done such that you buy a core product and you need another product which is an accessory in order to use this core product. Now, this accessory that you need in order to use the core product is what we will also refer to as the captive product. So this product holds you captive such that if you do not buy this accessory, you will be unable to use the core product that you have purchased. And we use printers and printer cartridges as a typical example. If you can't buy the printer cartridge, you can't use the printer. If you don't buy the video games, you can't use the console. If you don't buy airtime, your SIM card is virtually useless. So I hope you get it now. Okay, great, David. So aside captive pricing, right, the fourth kind of pricing we can talk about is market pricing, which refers to the manner in which firms allow prices to be determined by how already existing prices of a similar nature are being sold in the market, right? So it's basically determined on a competitive basis. such that if everybody who sells a similar product in the market is selling it around the same price point, that is where the firm is also going to position their product for sale. Now, this kind of pricing requires for the exporter to this foreign market to have thorough knowledge of product costs, as well as confidence that they will be able to recoup the value of their products and how much they spent in manufacturing it along the life of the product cycle by pitching their price at the market price level as it's being sold by all the competition. Otherwise, it will not make any sense to enter this foreign market using a market pricing tactic. So in as much as you want to be able to price at the level that everybody else is selling in the market, you need to be able to also think about it in terms of your cost of production and whether or not it is a cost-effective measure to sell at the same price that everybody is selling in the market or close to the same price. So you realize that in the marketplace, the same products that you buy, you go to a particular seller and they're selling it for a particular price, and you go to another seller and the same item is of a higher price. A typical example is the bottled water that we buy. You go to a restaurant and you can pay 5 cedis or up to 10 cedis for a 500 ml bottle of Baltic, isn't it?
Yes.
But if you step down and you come to the kiosk in your area, how much will you buy it for? Sometimes even less than 1 cedi. And this is where the people who are selling the Baltic at the restaurant realize that based on the cost that they have incurred, they can't sell the Baltic at 1 cedi. They need a way to recoup the cost they have incurred in setting up the restaurant, putting on the air condition, getting those comfortable chairs that you go in and sit on, paying the waiters who are serving the food and the drinks, paying for all the other amenities in the place, which the neighborhood kiosk person is not exactly paying for. Please, you get it?
Yes, Doc.
So those who go to the restaurant and they buy Baltic water for 10 cedis and they complain, I laugh and I get upset with them. Because you can't expect to walk into a restaurant, sit in a comfortable seat in an air-conditioned room and pay 1 cedi for a bottle of Baltic. It's not economic wickedness, Emmanuel. It's only fair. It's only fair. Some people will not, Nigel, some people will not be caught dead buying water in traffic. They don't even want to be seen reaching out through the glass of their window to buy water in traffic. Because for some of them, on moral grounds, they do not believe that the people should even be on the streets in the first place. So by buying from them, they are encouraging more hawking on the street. Right, so you look at what works for you and then you go ahead. But this is a typical example of why market pricing may not work for every firm, particularly if they are choosing to enter a new market, because it may have cost implications for you, depending on your approach to entering. So you realize that the same product that people import into Ghana, depending on the distribution channels that they use, it will cost more. So someone will decide they want to buy a product from abroad, and then they'll have a family member buy it and bring it to them because it will be cheaper than buying from someone who imports the item directly from abroad, because the person will add the cost of all the expenses they incurred in paying for the duty and the freight and the transportation of the product from this foreign location all the way to Ghana and putting it up in their air-conditioned shop for sale. Please, I hope that makes sense.
Yeah.
Doc, please. I'm a bit confused.
Yes, Juliet. Let us help you.
The market pricing, is it that for it? Is it that maybe, as you are saying, Baltic is sold maybe 1 cedi everywhere, but at these restaurants they are sold at a different price? Is that it?
Yes.
Or because
so the general 1 cedi price is the market price, isn't it?
yes.
Good. But what we are saying is that market pricing may not be smart for a firm who has incurred additional costs to bring the product to the market and sell it to the customers. So if you sell it to the customers at the price at which it's being sold on the market, you may incur losses. Are you there? because you have additional expenses that you have to pay off.
Okay.
So you can't price it at the market level, because if you do, you would incur loss. So in that case, you have no choice than to sell it at a higher price because of the additional elements of cost that surround your delivery of the product to the consumer. And the typical example is the restaurant we are talking about that has a prime location, that it gives you comfortable seats, air conditioning, and all that. These are all cost elements surrounding the sale of the product, which those who are selling it at 1 cedi do not incur. Is it okay now, Juliet?
Yes, please.
Awesome. Priscilla, they sell 1 liter for 25 cedis at La Pound. Hey. Interesting. Okay. At least now you get the reason why they sell it at those prices. It is as a result of, oh, Anita, it's not Kalabule.
Yeah.
It's economics. It's economics. So let's look at some environmental influences on pricing decisions, which will determine which of these pricing options a firm will choose. Tara, please go ahead.
Okay, I just had a quick question about the market pricing versus skimming.
Yes,
so
please.
would you say that in a way, because the restaurants understand that they have these extra costs, could
Yes.
you in a way say that in that case they are market skimming, or because their entire, because obviously if you're going to say Santoku, which is known as a very high-end restaurant, that has the image or the aura of the market skimming. I think they fit into that market skimming.
Yeah, so they are skimming.
Category. So they are
Yes,
skimming.
please. Yes,
okay,
please.
Very good. All right, thank you.
You're welcome, Tara. Okay, so let's look at some of the environmental influences on these pricing decisions. The first one we can talk about is currency fluctuations. Right? Depending on the foreign market you are entering into, when you compare the currency in your country, which determine the cost at which you produced or manufactured the product you are selling there, and you compare it to the currency of that country, you need to be able to determine in terms of the exchange rate how much you have to sell the product in their currency to be able to recoup the cost that you incurred in manufacturing the product, right? So currency fluctuations here play a key role in determining how much a firm will charge for their product or service. Also, the inflationary environment in the market, right? Inflation, we all know, affects the value of money. So if there's a high level of inflation in this market, it will definitely determine where you choose to peg the price of the product or service that you are selling in this market to be able to ensure that you account for the inflationary conditions in that environment. Also, government controls, subsidies, and regulations will determine how much you sell your product or service. Because if government is providing some kind of subsidy, which is reducing the amount of cost you are incurring in this particular market, it will be a motivation factor to sell the product at a lower price, given that you are benefiting from some other costs, some other lower costs in various areas, like tax holidays, which are often given to a number of firms who are engaged in various forms of activity in these foreign markets. So depending on the government control, subsidies, and regulations, you may be able to get some benefits that could influence the pricing decisions that you make and ultimately determine how much you decide to sell the product or service to the customers in these markets. Priscilla, you said hedging is important to cater for inflation. Okay, Priscilla, can you quickly clarify?
Hi, Doc. Can you hear me?
Yes, please. Please go ahead, my dear.
Okay. So when the product is highly dependent on inflation or foreign exchange, so sometimes if the dollar is at 5, right,
Yes,
and
please.
then you have to incorporate, let's say, an exchange rate of 6 or 6.5.
Yes, please.
So that at the end of the year, when you're paying back your principals, you as the importer do not run into debt. So
Exactly.
the distributors would sometimes call that hedging.
Yes, please. Very well said, Priscilla. Thank you for that explanation. Okay, so aside these three, we can also talk about using your sourcing as a strategic pricing tool. You realize that firms would usually think of smart ways to be able to source their products at a cheaper price so that they can be able to sell it at a lower price in a particular foreign market. So you realize that if you are buying the same item in the same shop, depending on where it is sourced from, the prices will differ. And that is because of the strategic pricing tool being applied, given the cost implications of sourcing the product from one source or the other. So you realize that a lot of firms like to manufacture their products in countries like China because it is cheaper to source their products from there. That way they can be able to sell it at different prices in different markets, sometimes at cheaper prices in some markets and at higher prices in other markets, depending on other conditions in those market environments, right? So when it comes to the alternatives to pricing products and services in different parts of the world, a firm can decide to use an extension or ethnocentric pricing policy where they like to price an item at the same level, no matter where it is being sold in the world. So they would translate the price of the product to the foreign currency equivalent of the market in which it's being sold and sell it at the same price, not considering differences in economic situation or differences in inflation or whatever. They will sell at the same price, given that they are using an extension or ethnocentric pricing approach. Whereas with the adaptation or polycentric pricing approach, they allow the subsidiaries or the affiliate managers or their independent distributors in these markets to establish whatever price they wish to sell the product at. So they will manufacture and give to these subsidiaries or distributors or managers at a particular price. And however they decide to price it for sale to customers in that foreign market is up to them. And this happens in the event that the firm decides to use an adaptation or polycentric pricing approach. However, if it is a geocentric pricing approach, then the approach will be more dynamic and proactive, in the sense that they will realize that all these markets, despite the fact that we are in a globalized world, are not the same as we have established in terms of levels of inflation, in terms of currency fluctuations, in terms of government regulations and subsidies. So they would look at the local market conditions and let those determine the price of the product or service as is charged to buyers in these foreign markets. So in terms of the various pricing decisions that are made, they are made in line with the firm's approach to pricing, be it an ethnocentric pricing approach, a polycentric one, or a geocentric one. Priscilla, please go ahead.
Yes, Doctor, question. So
yes,
in cases where there are parallel importation,
yes.
So for example, you have something, you're selling something at 1 cedi in Ghana, but you price it at 2 cedis in Nigeria.
Yes.
And then people come and pick it up from Ghana, and then, you know, they start destroying the market in Nigeria. Where would that fall under these global pricing alternatives, and where would you which one would you advise a firm to use?
So they pick it from here and they go and sell it there at a lower price.
Yes,
is that what you're
1 minute,
saying, Priscilla?
Please give me 1 minute. Hello.
Okay,
Yes,
Sarah,
Doc.
please go ahead. Yes, Priscilla.
Yes, so for example, let's say Johnson and Johnson products. So let's say that the baby products.
Yes.
A mother would import it from UK, right?
Yes.
And bring it here to use, and it might be cheaper. But
yes.
a distributor importing directly from Johnson and Johnson might have
yes.
it more expensive.
Yes.
Right. So in this case, you have the same company.
Yes.
But different prices. So one
yes.
cannibalizing
so
each
more
other.
of the polycentric pricing approach.
Okay.
Because they are selling at different prices, right?
Yes.
Good. So it's either polycentric or geocentric.
Okay.
But in this case, I think it's more of geocentric because they are deciding to sell it there because of the unique situation in the Nigerian market.
So in this case, let's say that to avoid that, do you say you price a product in Ghana the same price as in Nigeria?
Yeah, you can. You can, depending on your strategy and whether it will be cost effective for you to do so. Because remember, we mentioned that these decisions are not taken lightly.
Yeah.
You need to evaluate the cost implications and the effect it will have on your bottom line. Because these people may be selling it at a cheaper price, and perhaps they are making losses. So you need to decide if what you really want to do is to reduce your price in that market to be able to combat their approach, or keep selling it at the same price. Or some other firm will also decide to pull out of the market completely, depending on how extensive the operations of these people are in Nigeria.
Okay, all right, thank you.
You're welcome, Priscilla. Tara, please go ahead.
Okay. All right. So my question is a little in line with also what Priscilla asked.
Yeah.
But then in this case, there was an instance where a shop that initially opened up in the US, a US store, I believe it was Victoria's Secrets.
Yes.
When they opened one up in the UK, we noticed that initially, if a set of lingerie, for example, was selling for $70 in the States, you'd expect that to be roughly about maybe 50 or 60 pounds in the UK.
Yes.
But then it was the same it was the same figure, and they just changed the currency. They just, that's all they did. So in that case, would you say it was they were using the geocentric because they felt that that unique local markets required it to be higher? Or would you say in this case it would be the adaptation or polycentric, because it's the same company that's sending,
but the pricing is different?
Well, yes, it is. The value of it is different. That's true.
Yeah. So I think it's a geocentric thing, taking into consideration the currency or exchange rates. Yes.
Okay. All right. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome, Tara. Hey, so those are using DSTV Nigeria in Ghana. How is that possible? That's very interesting.
Very possible, Doc.
Wow. We have experts in our midst too. Okay, so on that note, unless there's someone else who wants to say something, I tell you, Abu, the day DSTV decides to clamp down on these people, there'll be trouble. Because I think.
But Doc, how come we are getting the same stations, and one is cheaper and one
the
is
same
expensive?
Company. You know, Nigeria's situation is very different from ours. In terms of their economic situation, even in terms of their power situation. So I think the low price is a way to motivate them to sign on to the package.
Oh, you see, when you go to Nigeria, it's very funny. You see a house that is so not nice.
Yeah.
But you just see the DSTV dish there. But meanwhile, the DSTV is portrayed here as a luxurious thing for
in Ghana here. Exactly. Right. It goes back to all these contextual differences that we talk about. And I'm sure if someone would one day do a study to find out why DSTV is cheaper in Nigeria, it will be very interesting to find out the reason why. So perhaps one of these days, one of you can independently engage in a conversation with.
I heard their parliamentarians went to South Africa for a program.
Okay.
And that was when they discovered that it's cheaper there. So they had to summon them. They invited them to come to one of their meetings, and they asked them, why is it that they are getting it from South Africa and they are being asked to pay more than what is being paid in South Africa?
See, now the truth comes out.
They were compelled to reduce it for everybody to be able to sign up.
See, I knew it would be an interesting reason. Our government has not bothered to go and fight for us. Our government has not bothered to go and negotiate. See why they fix the country people sometimes have gravitas. This one, the government decided to say, no, we are not paying anymore. Reduce it for our people. So you realize that the pressure was coming from a macro environmental factor, a political factor for that matter, political and regulatory, which is very powerful, because I'm sure if they hadn't reduced the price, they could have kicked them out of Nigeria. Right? So I knew there was an interesting reason, and thank you for telling us about it, Juliet. Very, very, very insightful. Right. So on that note, we've come to the end of our session for today in our discussion on the product and pricing element of the global marketing mix.